So hello and welcome. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, November the 19th. This is episode number 134 of Backyard Beekeeping Questions and Answers. My name is Frederick Dunn and this is the way to be. So I'm glad that you're here. 39 degrees Fahrenheit outside, snow everywhere, and that is 4 Celsius. So this is November, let's see, the 19th. Holy cow. So, well, the bees are buttoned up. What happens this time of year is we all sit around and worry about our bees and wonder if we haven't put enough insulation, or if they have enough food, and we take thermal pictures of the bees, or we sit at home and we submit questions. By the way, how do you submit a question to me for my consideration? You go to fredsfindfowl.com or thewaytobee.org, same place. Then you click on the page called The Way to Be, and there's a form on there, and you can send me a personal message there. You can even stay anonymous if you want to. But if you want to submit your questions, that's the best route. You can also make comments down in the video below this video. And please look in the video description today to see what we're going to talk about. And also there'll be some links in there that you might find valuable. So let's jump right into it. Here's the very first question, which comes from Ken, Pennsburg, PA. Let's see, I live in Southeast PA and was wondering if we have a warm day in the mid-50s to 60s, is it okay to do an oxalic drip method? Or would that introduce too much moisture in the hive for when the temperature drops at night? Thanks. So here's the thing. We're talking about oxalic acid. Oxalic acid is a miticide, so we use it to kill varroa destructor mites in our beehives. There's 3 methods of delivery for oxalic acid, by the way. First, like when you receive a package of bees in the mail, and we know then that any mites that are in that package would be phoretic, which means they're clambering around on top of the bees or in transition and they're not hidden away. So now you can treat them, and one of those is sugar syrup with oxalic acid mixed in it, and you spray the package. There's instructions on how to do that. And of course, there's the oxalic acid vaporization method, which you hear a lot of discussion about because the vapor inside the hive goes everywhere. And this all is intended to kill the varroa destructor mite. But that oxalic acid vaporization, which by the way I use, right, when necessary, is dangerous. It's not moderately dangerous. It is very dangerous to the people because you can breathe it in and it can damage your lungs. So you have to wear a certified respirator that's going to protect your lungs. You have to protect your eyes. You should protect your hands and so on. Follow all the instructions and all the safety guidelines. But there is a safe method of delivery, and that's why some people choose to do oxalic acid dribble. That's the third method. So we've got the spray on the package. We've got the oxalis, which is a sublimation process, which is potentially dangerous to people using it. And then we have the dribble method, which eliminates those dangers but can be used on the hive itself. Now the efficacy, how effective it is and how many mites it will kill, will be a little bit less than what you get with the oxalic acid vaporization. But with the safety aspect, now see, I took the long way around the barn because I just want you to understand what we're talking about. It is considered an organic treatment, a natural treatment, because oxalic acid occurs naturally in the environment through a lot of the vegetables that we ourselves eat. So it's considered benign as far as what goes on in the hive. So the big thing here is temperature. That's what the question centers around. We're going to hit the mid-60s and we're going to hit the 50s. Those are great temperatures, by the way. And yes, you can do a dribble at that time. So one of the things you want to do, and again, I'm going to say it even though I haven't published the video yet because I have so many different parts to it. What does really cold sugar syrup do to the bees? What does it do to their ability to fly and things like that? That's coming up in another video when I finally get around to it. But So the thing is, when you're mixing up, and I'm going to put a link down in the video description on what the exact recipe is for mixing your oxalic acid with sugar syrup to create your dribble so that you can squirt it out. And you're also going to need a 60cc syringe, a plastic syringe. They're very inexpensive, but that's the delivery method. So anyway, that's not too cold. In fact, when you follow the guidelines for oxalic acid dribble, so you're going to dribble it directly on the bees in between the frames in your hive where the cluster is, you can go all the way down to in the 40s, I believe. So I'm going to give you a link that shows you what those exact parameters are. So the other thing is, we want it to be warmer before we put it in there, because when we put any kind of syrup in a hive that's below 50 degrees, follow me on this, the bees sit tight. In other words, they take it on board, it chills the bee has to overcome that chilling, and then they have to, of course, increase their body temperature in order so they can move around or even generate heat on their own. So it's a good method to do, and I recommend that you do it with 2 people. So one of the first things you want to do, if you know somebody that's got a thermal camera, this is the time to invite them over for a hot chocolate. Hey, Bill, come on over. Bring your thermal camera. I just want to see it. And then when they come over with their thermal camera, say, hey, you want to walk out in the bee yard with me? And then you do a thermal scan of your hives and you see where the cluster is located. Because this time of year, if you've got 2 or 3 boxes on the hive, if that's the composition of the hive, we want to know where the cluster is, because the cluster is where you're going to apply your oxalic acid sugar syrup dribble. And so, because we don't want to open an area that's not going to be treated, right? So if the cluster's in the bottom box, which in a perfect world, that's where it would be. So then you leave your outer cover on, you leave your inner cover on, and you're going to pry up the box above the cluster. Now, if the cluster spans 2 boxes, like if you see the joint there when you're doing your thermal, and a little bit of that cluster rises up above the joint, you're going to go above that, and you're going to drizzle down on top of them. Don't break the cluster. It's bad enough that we're going to break the propolis seal on the beehive this time of year, but in the 60s, they could probably fix that up a little bit on their own, and the trade-off is, of course, that we're going to kill phoretic mites. Why do it now? Because there's smaller brood this time of year, and we get most of the mites. So you get your friend to crack it open, tip the hive back, or you can do that part, since that's probably the most undesirable part to do. And then when they get it open, you take that syringe, and you can even get little tubing to give it a little extension there if you want to. And then you're going to drizzle that between the frames right on the cluster of the bees. They're going to warm it up if it's not at their body temperature, which it probably won't be, and they're going to consume it. So it's not like you're going to add a bunch of moisture to the hive, because the other thing is it's a syrup. It's a high sugar content syrup. And again, the recipe is going to be down in the video description below, but you can do that this time of year. And those are the parameters. Those are fine. If you're in the 50s and 60s, warmer is better when it comes to that stuff. So I hope that answers the question. What else did I do here? Yeah, you can go down into the low 40s for application there. But there again, warm it before you bring it out. It'll drizzle better. It'll get on more bees. More bees will consume it. And they'll consume it as a ready energy source, by the way. So it's not like you're going to be storing it or anything. Just like if there were open cells of nectar this time of year. Open cells of honey, for example, get consumed first before they get into the cap, sealed up, stored stuff. Question number 2, moving on. This is Scott from Fort Collins, Colorado. Sometime between late October and mid-November, my whole hive, which in early October completely filled out the deep brood box and medium super, died. Almost all the bodies are outside the hive, hardly any inside. A number of young bees died while chewing out of their cells, and there was maybe a half frame of dead capped brood, but otherwise the brood box was either empty frames or bee bred frames. So I don't hear a lot about capped honey on those frames. And we don't know what the recent temperature parameters have been there either. So as much information as you can give about the circumstances weather-wise and everything else at the same time is helpful. So I treated with Formic Pro over 20 days in late September. So if we did the Formic Pro, Again, that's a treatment that can be done with honey superzon. It penetrates the cap wax on your pupa, so it's very effective. And when Scott says he did it over a 20-day period, that means he put a pad on there for 10 days and then a second additional pad for another 10 days. There's another option to put 2 Formic Pro pads on at the same time over the brood box. So this was the 10 and 10, which, by the way, is easier on the queen. You don't want to risk messing up your queen going into winter. It's too late to replace her. Anyway, very, very large mite drops on the mite board after treatment, then again after the hive died. And when we say very large mite drops, counting mites is pretty important, and doing a mite count. Since we have a bunch of dead bees already and the colony's in decline, I also do mite washes on dead bees. I know the mites would naturally move on to the living bees to survive, but you can also count dead bees. There's nothing to lose there. See what's in them. And no other evidence of disease that I can tell, but still researching bee disease on the internet. So we have to look at potential brood disease, because with all these bees dying and all these bees outside the hive, that's interesting too. It's much different to have a pile of bees dead in front of the hive than it is to have a pile of bees dead inside the hive, which means they probably got out on their own steam and died, because every honeybee that's dying in a hive tries to leave the hive. They don't intend to die inside the hive. So that's very telling too. When there's a pile of dead bees out in front of the hive, and this did not occur at the same time of the Formic Pro treatment. So we don't make that correlation at all. The other thing is we have to look at the condition of the bees that are on the ground. If their tongues are out, it would be really interesting if you could see them while they're dying, because that also tells you things if they're trembling, if they seem uncoordinated, if they're walking in circles, things like that, because these did get themselves out. The other thing is partially hatched brood. Once the nurse bees are thinned down in number, and once the mantle, the cluster of bees, is reduced because we have all these dead bees in front, now we have a secondary problem, which is that the brood could just be chilled. So when the temperatures drop and there's not enough bees to insulate it, you end up with chilled brood, and therefore dead brood partially hatched out and things like that. So the mite load, again, just because we got these mites under control, what do we do? When was the treatment done? If the treatment was done late in the year, then it means that the mites have been spreading disease to those bees all this time. So if you had a heavy mite load, we also have heavy infection loads on all the critical bees in the hive, which are the nurse bees, of course, and then outward to the foragers and others that would have shortened lives because of the pathogens that the Varroa destructor mites pass on to the bees. So the time to get those under control is August and September, and do meaningful mite counts. And I'm not saying that wasn't done here, it's just not described. But these are all potentials for why the bees were sick going into winter. So then very large mite drops on the mite board, and then again after the hive died. No other evidence of disease. So looking up brood disorders and brood disease, there are a lot of great educational resources for that will show you brood conditions. And the final question is it safe to harvest the full medium box of capped honey left on for winter? So if there's a full medium box of capped honey, even if the bees were sick and you harvest that for human consumption, we don't recycle any of that back to any of your beehives, then it is generally considered safe for human consumption, because we don't get, foul brood. We don't get the disorders that are carried on within the hive and within the species of Apis mellifera. So there's nothing that affects us. So for human consumption, yeah, you could extract and harvest that honey. In fact, go ahead and do it now since they're lost. There's been no robbing. And is it safe to use the brood frames for a new package next year? Now that's the bigger question. And this is where, different beekeepers, the idea of how could you kill potential pathogens on old brood frames, because they're valuable, and they would of course give a new package of bees a real boost because they wouldn't have to draw out their fresh comb. And I'm going to make a fail-safe recommendation, because I can't tell. if it's safe to reuse that. I don't know what the potentials are as far as what might have been going on in that hive. I don't know if there were toxins. I don't know if they've been exposed to some kind of poison, some environmental, agricultural poison related issue that also might be concentrated now in the honeycomb itself. So I personally would pull out the brood comb and I would get rid of all of it. A good substitute for that, if you want drawn comb in spring, which we talk about a lot around here, is better comb. You could put 2 or 3 frames of that in there, no reason to fill a whole box with it. And then the rest could be just foundation or preparation for spring. So I think that's what I would do. The darkest comb, the comb that the brood was active on, because they did die and we have unknown reasons for their death. So we don't know what pathogens might exist. It might just be in the bodies of the bees in a perfect world, and then the bees just die. And in a perfect world, I mean not contaminating the entire hive. You have to look for evidence of American foul brood. And of course, but adult bees are not affected by American foul brood. It affects the brood. So the adults wouldn't all be piling out and dying in a huge pile in front of the hive. So you can halfway rule that out, but you need to carefully evaluate. I would bring somebody in if you know somebody that knows how to look at the brood frames and to see if you might have some secondary problem there. But a fail-safe for a new beekeeper when you've got a die-off like that is not to reuse your brood frames at a minimum. So that's it. Tragedy. Not good. You get this big, powerful colony that's doing so well, and then out of the blue, they pile out and die. Next question comes from Steve. This is question number 3. We talked before about my queen caging process here that I was going to do next year, and that's what this is pertaining to. Steve says, when caging the queen in a single frame excluder, and I'm going to reach back here and get it so we know what we're talking about. This is the single frame queen excluder that we talked about before, and this goes up against whatever the warmest side of your hive is. And this will cage the queen while we reduce the production of brood so we can have a broodless cycle inspired by the backyard beekeeper who does not care about honey production, by the way. You're going to have a production loss when you do this. When caging the queen in the single frame excluder, why must you wait 14 days before releasing her? Isn't it possible that she could have just laid eggs in the open portion of the hive before being caged? That will be capped in 10 days, potentially harboring mites. Did I miss something? And okay, I understand. Because we know that how long does it take to hatch out baby bees? She lays an egg, 21 days later, we've got new bees hatching out. And oh look, so I happen to do this little sheet, so we could work this out here. So I'm going to zoom in on it. So over here, this is my process, and this is what we're going to be doing next spring after the early spring nectar flow, and we're trying to keep bees from swarming. So it's swarm control, and it's going to guarantee us an opportunity to do a single dose of oxalic acid vaporization to get over 90% efficacy on the varroa destructor mites. So step 1, and this would be the same if it's an 8 or 10 frame brood box. We cage the queen. So that is day 0. We cage the queen onto a single full deep frame of drawn comb. That's so that she can continue laying on this frame, and also so that her pheromone is strong, so the colony doesn't feel that they're queenless. That's why we're keeping her right here instead of pulling her out and putting her in another box. So now let's say, as the question refers to, right? Question refers to, what if the queen just laid an egg? Well, we took that into consideration. So here's the egg out in the rest of the frames in the hive, right? So we have, as described, on the 9th day, the eggs that she might have laid before being caged would now be capped brood, right? So now we've got mites that were running around inside the hive would be under the caps of the capped brood, and that's fine with us. Because now we're keeping the queen caged, so this is my timeline up here, see? And on the 14th day, that's when we pull this cage that we put on here on day 1, we take that off. Because now the queen has from the 14th day to the 24th day before her new eggs. So if we let her out of that cage and she starts laying right away, we have until the 24th day from the time we began this before her new eggs are developed and now capped with the potential to harbor mites. So our sweet spot is, assuming that eggs were laid just before she went in her cage, 21 days after that, those are uncapped and hatched out. That's my little hatching out brand new bee right there. So we have from the 21st to the 24th day to give a treatment, a single treatment of oxalic acid vaporization. That's our treatment window before they get a chance to get under new caps. So between this period, the 21st day to the 24th day, so let's say day 23, right in the middle of that with a safe margin, we have nothing but phoretic mites in there. Oh, what if there are drones? Remove drones' combs and also damage any drone cells that you see at the time of caging the queen, because those would carry out to this 24th day. We don't want drones hatching out and releasing a bunch of brand new varroa mites either, so you would cut away drone comb where you find it, and usually very early in the year, early in spring, wherever you are. They are not producing a lot of drones yet. If they are, get the drone comb out to make this work. And then of course, we pull this frame out. This frame goes to the freezer right away. That's on the 14th day when we remove the cage and we release the queen. We put a new frame in here. We remove this frame, we put it in the freezer, and then you feed this back to your chickens. Or after everything is dead from the freezer, you can put it back in the hive and the bees themselves will clean that up and remove all the dead brood. And that is my method for two things. One, it's going to control swarming. It's going to reduce that because we're going to reduce our numbers. Sorry you had to see my face really close. Anyway, it's going to reduce swarming because we reduced the population. So backyard beekeepers, this all came about because people were asking me, I only want 2 hives. I don't want any more bees. I don't have anybody to give them to. I don't want to make splits and stuff like that. I want to control the numbers. So this does a couple of things. It's a natural way to control the brood population. Keeps your queen active, keeps her accepted by the workers in that colony, creates an artificial brood break, which means that we expose the mites, kill those mites with our oxalic acid vaporization or whatever your preferred method is, but you get them in a single dose instead of a series of a bunch of doses. And so we've controlled 2 things at once and not lost our queen. And that's what I'm going to do. So we're going to be testing that in 2022 because that's going to be fun to do. I have a whole bunch of those frames, by the way. The cages, the queen cages, which come from, where do you get them? There's only one place that I found them, and that is Blue Sky Bee Supply. So if you go there, get those cages, and don't forget to tell them that Frederick Dunn sent you so that when you're checking out, you'll pay exactly the same as everybody else does. Absolutely no deduction there whatsoever. Question number 4 comes from Natalia Roberts. Hi Fred, the FLIR thermal camera visualizes only escaping heat from the objects. Thus, if I wrap a hive in insulation material and achieve complete disappearance of the heat ball, then my bees must be warm for the winter. Am I right? So this, you're right, the thermal cameras only read surface temperature. And that's a very valuable tool to let us know if our bees are in trouble or not. And also it informs you as to when and if you need to put on supplemental or emergency feed. And it also lets you know, are my bees that are alive? Now, what if you've done something super cool like VenoFarm? Jim at VenoFarm, that's his YouTube channel. If you super insulate, you don't get to do thermals on the outside of your hive because it just doesn't radiate, the heat doesn't radiate through and give you that surface temperature, right? So you won't necessarily know. And even when, because you would think in theory, if you have no upper vent and things like that, that you could look at the entrance of your hive on a very cold day with your thermal scanner and you would see a change in temperature down there. You really can't. Sometimes they don't move a lot of air. And sometimes the colonies that are the least active, that look the most dead, for me, are the biggest surprises in spring. If you haven't done thermals on them, just by looking at there's no dead bees in the snow in front, which generally is a good sign because it means that they're flying out doing cleansing flights and things like that. And we get these colonies that people think are dead, And they're so anxious to find out if they're dead that they pull it open, only to find out the bees are right there. The cluster's pretty small, goose egg softball size. They would have survived, but you gave them the death blow by opening it up just because you just had to know right then and there whether your bees were alive or dead. So leave them closed up. The more insulated it is, the less information you're going to get from the outside as to whether or not they're even alive in there. So I like to see, so my thermal scans, because my hives are not insulated except on the top. And so I can see where the cluster is. So that gives me information. Now, if you had it all sealed up, I recommend you get something. I have nothing to do with this company. This company won't even answer my questions. But anyway, brood minder. There's a temperature gauge in here. These things are pretty inexpensive. You can put this inside your hive, and this will satisfy your curiosity as to whether or not your bees are alive or dead. Because dead bees don't generate heat in the middle of winter. So if there's any warmth coming up, last year I did a whole bunch of really inexpensive humidity and temperature sensors, and it makes you a little bit crazy, because what you're doing is you're checking them all day long. Ooh, that one's warmer than that one. Ooh, that one looks really cold. Ooh, the humidity is really high there. It hit 90%. What's going on with that colony? And so then you get a bunch of information, but what do you do with it? And the bottom line is, are they alive or are they dead? If they're alive, where are they? If you can't tell where they are in the colony, then of course you put emergency feed on top of your hive, on top of that inner cover, whether it's insulated or not. That's where your feed will go, because we don't want to, if you're in the south, you have advantages, right? But up here in the north, we can't be pulling off that inner cover in the middle of winter to add supplemental feed, to put mountain camp sugar on there, the sugar on the paper, because it requires opening it up and releasing that valuable warmed air just so we can add something that's intended to help them out. So we're slapping them and hugging them all at the same time. So, but we do have, with the insulated inner covers now, or your bottom board, your insulated inner board, you pull off the outside cover and then you take care of whatever kind of feeder you've got right there, which hopefully does not have an open airflow right through the center of it. So then you can put on emergency feed whether they need it or not, just in case. What's a 4-pound bag of sugar cost? A few dollars. So if you have a wrap it around feeder covering that hole, you fill it right up with dry sugar and you pull that inner plastic cover off, and then the bees have access to that. If they don't use it, they didn't need it. But if they need it and it's not there and they die because of you, you better go find the person in the mirror to blame on why your bees are now dead. So just because, if you look at it and you've got an insulated system, any heat above the environment, any heat, unless it's in sunlight, obviously, if the sun's striking it, it's going to create a hot side, for example. But if it's, early morning, sunrise time frame, sun hasn't hit anything, you go out there with a thermal and you scan it. If it's warmer at all than the environmental temperatures, so it's 27 degrees Fahrenheit outside, and this hive has an entrance that shows a 32 or 34 degree temperature just inside the entrance, something in there is alive generating heat. So it's not a lot of information, but it will let you know that they're alive. And thermal scanning is just for people that just want to know. We just have to know. But put emergency feed in there as a precaution, right on top. Because pulling apart the boards and stuff. So this year, that's right too. That's because I use it for my thumbnail already, so I have to mention it. People are writing me about this, and I just got it. That's why it's not on my beehives yet. 2 days ago it arrived. Hivealive fondant patties. This is going to tie into somebody else's question here. But this stuff deforms easily. It thins out. This could be put on top of the frames on the top, but you don't, again, want to pull apart your inner cover and everything else and expose the potential barely surviving cluster to cold temps. Those of you in warmer areas, you have better opportunities to do this. But I've really enjoyed the feedback that people have been sending me because they wrote about it. I had questions about it because I've never put it on my hives. I'm not vouching for this, by the way. I'm just saying it's what I'm trying this year. So they said they cut a little circle in this plastic here that matched the hole on the inner cover. And it says right on the back that you can set this inside on top of your inner cover below your outer cover. So you didn't pull the inner cover and expose your cluster to put this down on it, which is probably a better location, but it can be used up above on your inner cover with the little hole in the middle. And the other question I had for them was, see how thin this is? I said, are the bees actually, because the pictures they show me, the bees are coming through the center and they're eating, working their way out. I said, did they make it through and clear out even to the very corners? Do the bees move to all corners inside this packet? And they said they do. That some of them are on their second pack of these already, and this is coming from the UK. So the bees are using all the resources in this. So this seems like a pretty tidy thing because, and the reason I show how it deforms and bends easily is because what this is going to do when you set it on there, it's going to settle and seal that hole. And so my plan was just to cut a little X on it, but they said they cut a circle that matches the hole itself. So that's going to be fun to test this year. I have good experience with Hive Alive products. It's the first time I've ever tried out their fondant. So, this is the next one, number 5 here. It says that, and this was just feedback because I wanted to know how things are going. So I ask questions as much as provide information. It's an exchange because I like to know what works and what doesn't just through other people that are experimenting in their own backyard. So it's very valuable to me. This comes from Nicola. And yes, we put the fondant on the inner cover instead of the frames, and then we insulate around and over the top. We thought it would be easier for us to replace it with the least possible disturbance in winter. The manufacturer says you can leave it in the plastic. It's a pretty solid fondant and has a sugar-like texture between the fingers. We are new beekeepers as of this year, but everything so far has been great, and our 2 children are getting involved. So this is a shout out to Evelyn and Bradley, by the way. And they say thanks for the great videos, and we find ourselves saying, Fred said, do it like this. I think that is a very good foundation for all the guidance that every family around the world should do what Fred does. So I hope you know that I'm kidding. But that's good feedback, and they are using it, and it works like that. What's the purpose of it? The purpose of it is to defeat nosema and provide extra resources for your bees in the wintertime. Fondant does that. It's invertase. Bees consume it, use it right away. Moving right on to question number 6. This comes from Francis Moore, longtime viewer and commenter. Hi, Mr. Dunn. Great video. I hope you're well. And did you make your queens or did you graft? Thanks. Have a great day. So for this, and this is a good time of year to be talking about it. Do you know why? Because often this time of year, guess what happens? Things are going on sale. And all the big beekeeping suppliers and stuff are putting stuff on sale. If you're on your way to any of the beekeeping conferences, go there with plenty of extra space in your vehicle because it's a great time to buy stuff because everything's going to be sold at greatly reduced prices. It's going to be sold at reduced prices, and you can touch it, see it, learn about it. Go to the Hive Life conference in Tennessee. That's all I'm going to say about that. But the reason I bring this up is because this past year I used nucleus boxes, not the little flimsy thin ones. They're really nice, heavy made. They're just like beehives, same wood, same pine, and everything else. I finished them all with eco wood, and I started a whole row of them, and then I created a backup bank of brood boxes. A brood box is the height of a standard deep box. It holds 5 frames, and it has a single hole. And I can't believe I don't have one in here. Anyway, it has a single hole in front, usually about 3/4 of an inch in diameter, and then it's got a gate that rotates, that it's either wide open or it's vented, or there's a queen excluder, or there's a bumblebee excluder. So they're pretty interesting. And so the reason this ties into how I make my queens, I don't like grafting queens. I understand it. I think it's fun. Yay, you know, you get that little egg and you graft it, and whether you use a paintbrush or whatever you're using to transfer the eggs, and then you've got a cup, and then you have to have a grower and a queen finisher group and all of that. I don't like to do that because it's just too much work. I don't need a pile of queens. I only need backup queens. So I did that with 4 colonies this year. So I created 4 nucleus backup colonies of bees that I could use for comb. So when they produce comb, I can take that because I keep them small. If I need a queen, I might take a queen out of one of those colonies and let them build another one because it keeps their population down. In the past, I haven't liked nucleus colonies because they build too fast, they get too populated, and then they send out these swarms. So that's how I make my queens. I look at a colony that's looking really strong, and they could swarm. And in the spring, this always gets people off guard, especially where I live, because we get kind of the freak warm days, and the bees surprise us, and we don't realize how much brood they've been building up. And next thing you know, you've got a huge spring prime swarm on a tree branch at a time when you don't have the equipment to put them in. The environment is not putting out full steam yet, so they're ahead of the environmental provisions that should be coming in. And so they swarm because there's a great population in there. They swarm because some pollen and some nectar is available to them, and they're leading into the big nectar flow in spring. And so I pull 2 or 3 frames of brood out of them, prime brood, the best stuff. And it doesn't even matter if I take the queen with me or if I leave her in the parent colony. So let's say I'm just in a hurry, because I just take nurse bees and everything with them right on the frame. So I make sure that I've got eggs and open larvae on there, because that's where the nurse bees are hanging out, and I need the eggs to make a new queen in case I don't transfer the queen with the frames. So I take the 5-frame nuke, I bring it over and I sit it right next to my deep 10-frame box that's got all the bees that are overachievers, and I pull some prime frames and I put them right into my 5-frame nuke, and the frames that are in the 5-frame nuke I put adjacent outside of the brood area. So I push all those together and I make sure that the resident colony also has eggs and open larvae and plenty of nurse bees. And then I take that new nucleus colony and I go set it on a rack. And this past year, which is really ironic because I didn't feed them, I didn't do anything, I just left them with resources. I did use better comb so that they could start to store nectar right away, and they did fantastic. And then it turned out to be a terrific resource through the year, so I let the bees make their own replacement queens. And then of course within a couple of weeks I need to inspect the colonies, both of them, and I look for eggs and evidence that a queen is there. We know if we go past 3 weeks, the colony that was queenless, if they didn't make a new one, we have the potential to have laying workers. So 2 to 3 weeks, 14 to 21 days, that's when you want to be doing inspections to make sure that they're creating queen cells, that they're good to go, because you're going to know ahead of time the one that did not have the queen. So if you left the queen in the original colony, or if you moved her into the new nucleus hive, one of those colonies is going to be making queen cells in a very short amount of time. So you're going to know ahead of time. So that's the other thing. This is another way that I make my replacement queens. If I'm looking in another colony and I'm doing an inspection and it looks like they're making preparations to swarm out, and I find several different frames, this is important, not all on one frame, but I find several prime queen cells. Those are the ones that hang at the bottom of the frames. And they're nice and big and fat and healthy looking because they were developed at a time of plenty. The colony is strong, they're well nourished, and everything else is why they're reproducing anyway. That's why they're making another colony of bees. And then let's say I've got this frame and it's got 3 queen cells on it. I got this frame and it's got 2 queen cells on it. I look at the cells and I see which ones are the biggest, and I'm going to pull that frame. Then I'm going to go over there and I'm going to stick that in a nucleus colony, nucleus box. And I'm going to put frames around it and a little thing of honey so that they've got stuff to do. And then I'm going to take, again, frames out of that box, which is ready and on standby. And I put those empty frames in the colony that I just took these frames out of. They've got queens that they're making. By the time those queen cells are capped, there's a very good chance the swarm has already happened. So this is insurance for me. I just reduced their numbers a little bit. Everybody has queen cells. And they'll either, if they have a good queen and they don't need those queen cells anymore, let's say the queen that was about to swarm, I pulled her with the frame that has queen cells on it, but I put her in the new box. They may turn around and chew out the sides of those queen cells because now they don't want to have her swarm anymore. We created a false swarm. And some of the foragers will go back to the original hive, but the others, that's why the brood is so important. Those are the nurse bees that are hatching out. They're going to stay resident to that new nucleus colony. So to me, nucleus hives are the best way to make new queens and have resources for any of your other colonies that might be short on brood, that might not be getting a good kickstart. If you've got a queen that's not doing what she's supposed to do, you can get rid of that queen, and within 24 hours, you're going to walk right over to the other side of your apiary, and you're going to get one of those frames out of your nucleus colony, and you're going to put it in and put that colony right back in business. Not a hiccup. So nucleus colonies are great. That's why I tell you now, and why I made that little pitch about how things are going to be on sale soon. Black Friday, next Friday here in the United States, is one of the best shopping times ever. Buy those, get those ready, because now you'll have all this time in winter to paint and finish the hives, set up your frame, set up your support system for them, 18 inches off the ground. We don't want skunks messing with them here in the United States. And you can have a whole rack of them. And I even have new hive stands ready to go. I just need to get somebody to bring me some lumber to make my stands for, but I'm going to be ready for spring with a whole bunch of nucleus colonies, because the other thing that I want to be able to do as a backyard beekeeper who's also an educator, who's a master beekeeper, who likes to mentor people, when somebody's new to beekeeping and they're really promising and it looks like they're really learning and they know what's going on, I'm going to gift them a nucleus of bees, because now I just have them. So that's the other thing I would like to do, is I'll make twice as many nucleus colonies in the spring of 2022 than I did last year, because the experimentation is over with. They're doing great. It worked fantastic, and we can constantly break brood, interrupt brood. We could take both queens out. So if you've got eggs in a colony and you don't know where the queen is, but in the other colony you know that that's the one that's got the queen, but you want to have a solid brood break, you eliminate the queen and force them to make a new queen. So if you've already got queen cells, you're ahead of the game right there. So now there's a brood break. This is, and I just want to emphasize it, for those that are into honey production, that have a sideliner business, your goal is to limit the amount of time that your queen is not producing brood, because you need the populations to do the foraging, to get the nectar in, to do the pollination, and everything else you need to do. That's production-oriented beekeeping. That's why I always say this is backyard beekeeping. We would like to keep the numbers down. I don't want a colony that requires me to put 4 supers on, 5 supers on. I'm not the least bit interested in that. I'm interested in the biology of the bees, and I want to keep the clusters within 2 or 3 boxes, even all through summertime. And then when we get in that fall nectar flow, that's when we're going to get some honey off of the honey flow supers. We're going to get some comb honey from the Ross rounds. And we're again, of course, going to get traditional honey supers, with which my wife is very unhappy about. She just wants to stay with flow supers because they're so easy, or she wants to do the Ross rounds because they're easy to harvest and put them in little packs. And I was fortunate that Ciracell, that company, sent me a bunch of Ross rounds ready to go that are double tiered and go right into a deep box. So that's what I'll be trying next year too. But anyway, take advantage of upcoming sales and get your stuff together. And this is much more than Francis Moore ever wanted to hear about, I'm sure, because I could have just said, I pull a frame of eggs, I put them in another hive, I put brood with them, and I put a frame of honey in there. And then I put empty frames where those existed, but I push all of the remaining brood frames that are in the colony that I took those from, I push all those together. The new frames are on the outside of that. That's what I do. Simple answer. Get your stuff while you can. Nucleus colonies, the best way to make backup queens, extra resources for your bees. It just worked fantastic all year long. It was great. Best thing I ever did. So why I put that off for so many years, I don't know, because they were just out of hand. But now I have more time to spend with my bees. Question number 7 comes from Dwayne from Wisconsin. Let's see, question number 1, it says, I noticed that you still have spirulina on the shelf, but I haven't heard you mention it this year. Do you continue to use it, and if so, when do you use it? Well, let's address that first. Dry powdered spirulina. I keep it in the background just because it looks good. By the way, I know that people eat this stuff too. This is dry powdered spirulina. This is the organic stuff. The expiration on this one is July of 2022. A little bit of dry powdered spirulina goes a long way. The reason I got this stuff is because, of course, scientific studies were done. Universities published their studies, and then they talk about what the benefits were. Well, Dry powdered spirulina was put into sugar syrup, and then that's fed to the bees, and then of course they ingest it, and it works on their microbiome in their gut. So it improves gut bacteria. So what's the benefit? The biggest benefit, of course, was defeating nosema spores. So the problem is, now I did that for 1 year. It was great. The bees took to it like crazy, and I had a lot of questions from people when they saw my slow motion videos of European hornets and bald-faced hornets and yellow jackets. And they're all flying in slow motion, and some of them had little green globs on their faces, and they had little spits and spats of green liquid all around them. They thought that's because they'd been injured or there was some kind of poison. No, it was all spirulina syrup. So all insects were benefiting from it. But what also came out, I started reading about, and we had to do research also on the nosema spores, Nosema cerana. So the thing was, Hive Alive came out. So the same company that makes that fondant, there's a Hive Alive, liquid Hive Alive that was used. Their studies were published. It defeated nosema. It boosted brood and everything. Of course, if you defeat nosema, if you defeat diseases within the bees that cause them to lose weight, to live shorter lives and everything else, it stands to reason that also boosts colony numbers, boosts the brood, and so on. All validated. So I shifted gears away from spirulina. Even though I liked the study, Hive Alive was easier to work with. Spirulina, super cheap, I think, in comparison. But if you're a backyard beekeeper, small apiary, a bottle of Hive Alive is going to last you a couple of years easily. And Hive Alive is a long-term exposure. Part of that study was that the Hive Alive was added to sugar syrup at times of dearth. So we're talking early spring maybe. We're talking midsummer for some areas where the bees are not bringing in nectar and the hives are losing weight, so you want to feed them if you're trying to keep their numbers up. And then of course near the end of the year, again, the dosing was a gallon of Hive Alive syrup, treated syrup. So it's half a teaspoon per liter. So it goes a long way and it's proven to help. So all I did was I literally shelved the spirulina behind me here. Oh, that's funny. This is so now I just looked at myself in the camera. Okay, so Hive Alive, spirulina, both of these work on the microbiome of the bees, liquid form, and then the dry form. With the dry form, you mix it dry into your dry sugar before adding water. If you add water first, then the spirulina clumps and all that green stuff sticks to everything, and it really sticks. Hive Alive is thymol based, so it's an essential oil based treatment for your bees. So the reason I shifted and didn't use it, I've got plenty of that spirulina around. Again, it's good for human consumption. In fact, the packages that I bought were for human consumption. So people were thinking, Fred, so you're eating spirulina. That stuff's really good for you. I'm like, no, it's for the bees. Why would I eat it? Next thing I'll be eating kale, which I do like. I eat kale. It's very good. So that answers that question. Question 2, where can individuals find information on liability insurance for their apiaries? Would an LLC be beneficial? Okay, well, I'm not an insurance agent or a lawyer. I have talked about insurance companies that insure beekeepers. I've also talked with my own insurance company about beekeeping. In other words, do I have to have additional bee insurance? I have 21 colonies of bees. I have people coming here all the time. What if somebody got stung by a bee? Do I need more insurance or am I covered? So my insurance agent said, until I start teaching about bees here on my property. So this is another vote for the Way to Bee Academy being a virtual beekeeping school where people would just visit for key activities. Instead of having people come here to learn about bees for a solid week at a time or 2 weeks at a time and things like that, we would have virtual learning and then bring them here just for key moments. But that didn't get me out of the insurance liability, because if I'm teaching and the reason the people come here are to learn about bees under the Way to Bee Academy, that's worth establishing an LLC, which is a limited liability corporation. Because that separates that entity. If somebody walked out of that building and fell on their face and lost their prettiest tooth, and then I got sued, they could go after my personal stuff. You know, they could take everything I own, but if it's an LLC, then they could go after that and I would just lose my bee business. But that changes how I get insured. If I'm just keeping bees on my own, even if I'm a sideliner and I'm selling honey and stuff like that, the insurance, I'm told, covers me. But you're going to have to talk to your own insurance agent. But if you're just a backyard beekeeper, disclaimer, this is just my understanding as a layperson, that usually your homeowner's insurance should have that coverage within your policy. So there are companies specifically designed for beekeepers that insure your beekeeping equipment. There's an interesting fact that I learned also, and that's that some people get raided by bears and things like that, because I'm in black bear territory. This time of year, they're going into hibernation, so they're kind of ravenous, and they're going after all the resources they can get. So a 400-pound bear will come up and tear apart somebody's bird feeder to get 1 pound of black oil sunflower seeds. So they definitely will go after a beehive. But the interesting thing I learned was if they come in and decimate your beehive, our Fish and Game Commission actually has a fund, and you can actually be reimbursed for your losses. So that's interesting, which also your insurance company should know about because you want to recover your losses. Sometimes there's a lot of expense involved in setting up your apiary. The electric fence they just destroyed, the electric fence charger that the bear went over and tore off of the post because it knows when it hears that ticking sound that that's something that has to be dealt with before they can get into the beehive. That's right, a black bear will hear that ticking sound and, one, either avoid the area, or number two, deal with it until it stops ticking before it goes through the fence. There's a lot of stuff going on when it comes to black bears. So anyway, I can't give specific advice about liability insurance, but talk to your insurance company and see if you're protected, and read online. And of course, whenever you're considering an insurance company specifically targeted about bees, if it's a national company, make sure that they cover your area, and look into the reviews. Look into the people that have had claims and how it was handled by that company before you send your hard-earned money to them and establish your own LLC and everything else. That's it for today, if you can believe it. So that was short. Now yesterday, here's the fluff part, so we're just shooting the breeze now. Yesterday, I tested out my internet speeds because my internet speeds have picked up. And I did a live stream. And the live stream was just a test. So if you want to look at it, see what the quality was, it was terrible because the lighting was bad and the camera, was exposing in a bad way. So I fixed the camera. We also found out that we have live stream speeds that work really good. So now, guess what I can do? I can schedule a live stream, because that's the other thing was, when did you announce it? How are we going to know if you're going to do another one? I'm going to tell you right now. So get your calendar out, get your phone out, get your little tickler on there, because we're going to do a live stream Sunday afternoon, Eastern Standard Time, United States, 4 p.m. That's this coming Sunday. You're going to live stream right here. And so get your hot chocolate ready and sit around, and all I'm going to do is shoot the breeze. We're going to talk about bees, but we're going to do it live. So you'll be able to talk to one another in the little chat area, on the right of your screen, and you'll be able to say hello to your friends if they show up too. And because it's planned, what time is it? 4 p.m. this coming Sunday. So for some people, like in Australia, that's Monday already. And that's the reason I chose 4 p.m. because I believe that's 9 a.m. for a lot of people. Anyway, so everybody's kind of awake. It's a transitional time frame there. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to visit for an hour. So bring your questions. We'll just shoot the breeze. We'll talk, shoot from the hip, see what's going on. And I'll do that right here. So I want to thank you for being here today. And if you're having troubles keeping track of all the videos that you've watched, don't forget to click the like button down there. And then you'll know that you've already watched this video. I'm glad you were here today. I hope you learned something. I'm sorry it's so short, but write your comments down below if you have something else you'd like to know about. I do try to check in and answer questions as we go. The other thing is, join the Way to Bee group on Facebook. If you want to talk to people right now, share your pictures, learn what people are doing. And also look for the Hivegate Fellowship Citizen Science Group, also on Facebook. Find the links down in the video description below. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. Thanks for being here today.